How many of you feel that you don't fit the norm, you're out of the box? Raise your hand. Yeah, all right, that's all of us. That's amazing. Let me tell you why that's amazing. Kids know, when you are a believer of kids, a kid knows that, and they allow you to lead them. I want to have an impact on people's lives. I really, really do.
The passion for children, for teaching, for learning, he brings to every single conversation.
You change the atmosphere, you change the mood. You change the environment, you change the spirit.
Those kids believed in him. They respected him.
You are criminal!
Suing this district for breaching contract.
Right or wrong, that's us against them.
We are one community.
Yes.
In 1 year, everybody knew who he was. He was so important to us.
Lillian LaSalle, is that how you say it? LaSalle or LaSalle?
Either way.
Awesome.
Either way is fine.
You're the filmmaker behind My Name Is Pedro, a new documentary. It looks amazing. So before we get into the making of the documentary, can you just tell our viewers a little bit about who Pedro is?
So Pedro Santana is has been a teacher within the public school system in New York City, was then promoted to become an administrator. And the way that I discovered Pedro Santana is that the New York Times wrote a glowing article about him, about how he changed around a failing middle school in the South Bronx, where he is from, where he grew up as a principal. And that's how I came to know about him, and I loved the article. I called him the next day, and he was a person of immediacy, of optimism, of helping every child, and he was a person of yes. So when I called him, first of all, he answered my call, which was really incredible. I was expecting to leave a message. And when I said, I'm an independent filmmaker and I would love to come and meet him, he said, how's tomorrow? So speaking of that immediacy, that's how he worked in terms of how he taught as a teacher, how he led his staff as a principal, and how he worked as an administrator within the school system. Everything had to happen now, in the immediate, not being pushed off, not till next week, not till a month from now, but now. Let's deal with the challenges. What do the kids need? What do the teachers need? How can I help you in terms of support? Let's talk about that immediately. Let's make a chart. Let's talk to each child. He knew every child by name. Incredibly charismatic, optimistic person, where in watching the film, viewers cannot take their eyes off of him. He truly is someone that you've never met before.
Yeah, when I saw the trailer at first, I thought he was like some spiritual guru. I thought this was going to be like a documentary on like a new Yogananda type of person who was like, and then as I'm watching it, I realized he works in the school system and you're, now, the school system is very structured and there's a lot of protocol and there's a lot of, red tape and certain things. And Pedro seems like the kind of person that kind of wanted to bust through all that. And like you said, he wanted more immediacy and, he wanted to spend his energy helping the kids, not jumping through loopholes. How did the school system react to him initially? I mean, I sense that they like him, but at the same time, he was kind of a troublemaker.
Yes, he was a troublemaker in the best way. Over the years, I went to elementary school in the 70s. In the 70s, even in the 80s, I could run up and hug my teacher. There wasn't a problem with that. If I needed help from my principal, they could meet me after hours. They could talk to me outside of the school. And there have been many restrictions, understandably, within the school system about being able to help kids that way. But not all families with two working parents who work 12 and 16-hour shifts, especially in low-income neighborhoods where he wanted to make the biggest impact can come to school and talk to him during the day. And so he made home visits for kids who were in danger of dropping out of school. He made a difference in people's lives, in kids' lives. And his mantra was, it's all about the kids. And if an administration or the Department of Education has to say something to me about that, that's okay. I'll explain my way through that. But that absolutely posed some challenges for him, but he never gave up. He never gave up on his mission. He knew every student, wherever he went, by name. He would stop them in the hallway and say, I heard you were having trouble in math. How are you doing now? Can I help you study? Where are you? What was your last grade? Show me your grade. So he was all about the kids. And because of that, he inspired those children's families. Wow, there's someone who is a teacher, who is a principal, who is an administrator that cares about my kid, that cares about inspiring not only families, but the communities around them, and they supported him. So when there was a challenge, the parents came forward, teachers came forward to say, I don't think you understand. He's the best thing that's ever happened to this school, to this administration. Look at how test scores have gone up. Look at how happy our kids are. Look at how there are less fights in the hallways. No talk of gangs. No talk of drugs. And so that made his job easier. But of course, as people will see in My Name is Pedro, when it's released on streaming platforms, February 23rd, they'll see it wasn't a smooth ride. It's not a film about just how incredible this person was. It's a film that shows the truth and how someone who had so much optimism, like you mentioned, like a guru, he was a sort of guru figure. People who were his student 20 years ago talk about the impact that he's had on their lives. That's just an incredible thing. But the film shows a balance between his guru-like nature and the challenges that someone like that will experience within a certain administration that involves a lot of politics, and also in life. Wow. Not everybody likes an optimist.
That's very true.
Some people are very scared of optimists. They don't know if they can become that person. It's also surprising for a lot of people.
Right. I read that he himself was a special ed student growing up. Is that true?
Yes, he was. He was a special ed student growing up. And he had a teacher. So his Pedro was a teacher by the name of Ms. Torres in the 3rd grade, who took him under her wing. And in many ways, she inspired him not only to be the person he was going to be, but to be the kind of, she inspired him to become a teacher and teach other kids what he's learned. And she accepted him for who he was and spent extra time with him and allowed for time for him to have those light bulbs go off in his head, these teaching moments that allowed the challenges that he had as learning to then become positives for him. And he very often gives talks in the film to his students, to his teachers, very openly about the kind of child he was, and that everyone is a different kind of learner. And so he, as a teacher, catered his learning to each child. That's very rare to see in our public schools in our area. where there are 30 something kids in a classroom. Unless you are lucky enough to be born into a high income family who can send you to private school with less than 10 students in a classroom, you don't usually receive that kind of individualized attention. And Pedro was able to bring that. And in teaching, Pedro was a storyteller. He loved telling stories about his life, and he was very open about the challenges he had as not only a special ed student, but in terms of growing up in a low-income family, and how all of his siblings his several siblings would have to share a room, and how his father was in and out of prison, and his mother was homeless at one point. And he would tell these stories and say, "Isn't that amazing?" with a smile on his face. So students would see that these were actually experiences that allowed him to become the leader that he was, and to inspire those kids that despite their circumstances, that they could become great learners and they could become great leaders. And as a person of color, that was also an important thing for them, because they saw, look at his success. I'm a person of color. He's an inspiration to me. If he can do it, I can.
Yeah, that's something I recognize in what he was able to, the impact he was able to have on the people around him, because I think that a lot of times, certain communities, Latino communities, Black communities, especially if they coincide with an area that doesn't have a lot of resources, a poor area, they almost don't think they're deserving of this kind of attention or access to someone who really cares. To them, they're just fed into some sort of system, to hopefully be spit out at the other end in one piece. And here comes someone that kind of gives the kind of, you watch like a movie like Dead Poet Society, and you figure only in some like privileged, like educational situation can you have someone that really cares about you as a person and how you're developing as a person, not just a student. And it's something that what he was giving a lot of these kids, they weren't used to. So did he show that more? I guess the word is did he spotlight that situation, that problem, that lacking through what he did?
He didn't spotlight the lacking of what was surrounding those kids. He always emphasized the positive. There is a story that he tells about a time that he tells in an auditorium type environment to his students about a tragedy that he experienced when he was in the Peace Corps. And he speaks about it very openly, and it's a horrible tragedy that happened to someone very close to him. He talks about it in detail, all the gore. But from that, he told the students, that was a moment in my life that I could either dwell in the misery of that memory of my past, or I could say to myself, there's work to do. I have work to do in this life to help other people. And then getting to your question about kids not being used to it, sure, kids came to him with skepticism. They weren't used to people like him, and they weren't necessarily used to teachers like him. I can say that under Pedro's leadership, I also saw a lot of wonderful teachers because he inspired them. And I also want to add that there are incredible principals, teachers, administrators out there. They might be rarer to find, and to give them credit, to give everyone credit who's involved in education. It's hard, it's challenging. And I don't blame the teachers that cannot figure out how to differentiate their way of teaching to each child in a classroom. It's very difficult when classes are overcrowded, but they figure out a way to get through day to day. I know that each one of them is trying. And if those people had been able to, had been able to meet Pedro and spend a day with him, maybe they would change some things. Maybe they would become more of an optimist. I'm more of an optimist. And I find that teachers are sometimes beaten down. Teachers should be paid more. They should have an easier time in their lives, to have a little bit more of an economic advantage so that they can have support in their homes that allows them the strength to bring what they need to bring into the classrooms. Pay teachers, pay principals, pay administrators more money. Right. Those are the people in our communities that need it the most. Provide more programs for kids, particularly in low-income neighborhoods where there are so many budget cuts, more after-school programs, more places for them to be. One of the celebrities that I highlight in My Name is Pedro is Black Thought, who is the lead singer of The Roots, who talks about his incredible challenges growing up in a low-income neighborhood where both of his parents were actually murdered. And he talks about how much he got from his school building, from public education, where he was able actually in that building to discover what kind of musician he was going to be. And so it sounds like he was in a very special situation, but he says that actually public education changed his life. So there's a bright side and there's a dark side, but there's also a middle ground where I really believe that people can meet. Can I also mention how important PTAs are? The parents who involve themselves in the schools to try and make the schools better and to support those teachers and kids. So I want to invite as many people as possible to watch My Name is Pedro. It comes out on many streaming platforms on February 23rd. One thing that I include in My Name is Pedro is a bunch of students who I ask the question to, who is your Pedro? And everyone has a Pedro. You, Humberto, have a Pedro. So we have a bunch of people who say, my Pedro is. So if I can make a t-shirt, it would say, my Pedro is blank. My Pedro was Claire Levine in the 7th grade. And everyone has a Pedro. And I think that his legacy will be that there is hope, that optimism, if you can include that in your day-to-day life, that it will change your life. His legacy will be about listening, opening up to strangers, to people, helping people in need. His legacy will be about how every child can learn despite their circumstances. Every child can also try to advocate for themselves within their schools, even if they feel like they don't have the support. They can ask the teachers, I need help. Can you spend 10 minutes with me? And he talks about advocating in one of his stories. I won't give the story away. As I said, he spoke very much about his past very openly. He talks about being what he called an ambassador. So you can be an ambassador for yourself, but he talks about how he was an ambassador for his mother getting Medicaid, and having to go to those offices with her because she didn't speak English. and advocating for her in those offices. So those are things that will define his legacy. And then ultimately, without using a very cliched word, his legacy will be about love.
Very true, very true. By the way, my Pedro is Miss Casero, who got me into writing in the 9th grade, made sure that I stuck with it, even when I had my little sidewinding times in high school. So thank you very much, Lillian. And yes, I hope our viewers check out this amazing documentary about this amazing man, very inspiring. And thanks a lot for talking to me today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.